So before we start with our practical lab, let's dive into the theory. Now let me draw a structural view of the whole containerized application, that how it works. First, there's container. There can be multiple containers, and this container will be under a pod. Let me just select this and make a copy out of it. Okay, paste. So this is a pod. Now this pod, they will be managed by an YAML file, and these pods are gonna be inside a node, and there can be multiple nodes. Now multiple nodes can be under a pool. So this is the hierarchy of a containerized application. You can find this structural view in the Microsoft Learn document. So let me dive into it. Let's start with the first thing, container. Now containers are used to host the application inside. Now what are application inside? This whole containerized application started with the idea of containerizing the applications. So suppose before we know about the all these other things, let's see what is application instance. So what are application instances? Okay, so suppose I have created an application. I have created a software in my computer. Now I have the original product, and I've made it available to the internet, for the public people. Now you have downloaded the application and you have installed that application on your PC. Okay, you have installed the application on your PC. So this is called the deployment. This is called the deployment of the application. Now after the deployment, the application that you are using on your PC, after the deployment, the application that you are using is the copy of my original application. Now this copy of this application is called the application instance. Okay, so the containers are used to host the application instances. Containers, you can say, this is a standardized and repeatable way to package, deploy, and manage application instances. And these are managed containers. There's this one more thing that you should know, the virtualization. So I think you are familiar with the word virtualization. This will help you. Virtualization, this will help you to understand about the containers more clearly. So what are virtualization? You have I think you have used the virtual machines, VM. So VMs are used to virtualize the hardware that you have on your machine. VMs, virtual machines, they are created by using the virtualization of the hardware. We can use a VMware or hypervisor. We use this software to virtualize our hardware, and then we create VMs. Now containers, this container, this is the virtualization of our operating system, OS. That means the container virtualizes our operating system itself. You can run multiple containers inside an OS. So now we have seen what are containers. This is the container. Let me give you something more. Containers gives lightweight isolation from other containers, and containers can share resources between them. between them. Okay, and anything else? Okay, containers can be directly exposed to the internet with an IP and an FQDN. That means the fully qualified domain name. We're going to see, and we're going to know more about this IP and this FQDN in the Azure container instances. But just bear with me right now. So this is the 101 for the container. Now, what are pod? Pod are the logical term that is to run the application instances. Inside a pod, there can be one container or multiple containers. The ratio between the pod and the container is 1:1. That means in one pod there can be only one containers, but I've already said that you can run multiple containers. So that means in complex cases you can create multiple containers inside a pod. Now these pods are managed by the YML file deployment. If you want to know more about this, read the document in the Microsoft Learn. I will leave the link in the description. And then after that, here comes the node. Now what are nodes? Nodes are a virtual machine. Okay, virtual machine. Now remember that you don't have to manage a virtual machine when you're using or when you're playing with the container and Kubernetes services. So nodes are virtual machine. These are managed by the providers itself. You don't have to manage it, the virtual machine itself. It will be managed by the providers. So you have to just orchestrate, or you have to maintain all the other things like node pod. You have to maintain this yourselves, but the virtual machine is not your headache. So nodes are virtual machines, and you can see there's multiple nodes here and here. So with multiple nodes, it creates a pool. Inside a pool there can be multiple nodes, and inside a node there can be multiple pods, and inside a pod there can be multiple containers. So this is basically the hierarchy of our containerized application and the orchestration of the container. So there's one more thing. If you want to manage multiple containers, you have to, or multiple pods and nodes, you have to use orchestrator tools like Kubernetes. Okay, Kubernetes. You have to use Kubernetes to orchestrate this whole thing. And if you want to deploy only one container, you can use Docker. Okay, but for the orchestrator of the multiple containers, you have to use Kubernetes, some orchestrator tools like Kubernetes. So let me go into the Azure portal. So this is Azure portal, and I've already went ahead and created a storage account and a resource group. Here's the resource group. You can see the container access 101. I've created the resource group, and here's my storage account. I've also created a storage container 101. And to without the Kubernetes service, without the first we're going to show how, if you want to deploy on just only one container instances. If you want to deploy one container, you can just use the container instances from the Azure portal. You don't have to use if you don't have to use many other containers, more containers, you can use that. So I've already searched here. You can see there's the container instances. Just go there. Here's the container instances. You can create one. Just hit create, and let's give it a name. Just select a resource group. Okay, now let's give it a what we can okay. Let's give it a container name, container 1. It's a unique name. Okay, container 1 exe is gonna work. Okay, the container must only lowercase letter. Okay, just only lowercase letter. Okay, let's see. I think it's gonna work. Okay, container 1 exe. Now this has been done. Now anything else I have to check? Okay, let's go to networking, and now yes, we have to give the DNS name label, and we're making it public. You can say the public will create a public IP address for your container. I have already told you that you can expose container directly to the internet by making it public, and I have to give it a DNS name. Let's give container. Okay, just leave it right there. So there's the container, and now anything else? I don't think I have to do anything. Then review and create. Okay, now it's running the validation. Okay, the validation has passed. Let's hit create. Now the container is being created. Okay, so the container is created. Let's go to resources. Here's our container one exe, and here's the fqdm, and let's copy it. Okay, let's copy it. Let's paste it, and you can see our container is up and running to the internet. So this is how okay, there's one more thing I can show you, the logs. Okay, we can go to container settings, and from here we can see the logs, that how many hit there has been, the how many we're trying to access our container public, because it is publicly accessible, right? So let's wait. Why? Just refresh. Yeah, there it is. And from here you can click log, and you can see from the port 80, the HTTP, there has been log. Yeah, here's all the logs you can see. So this was all about the container instances from Azure. Now we're going to see about the Azure Kubernetes service, the AKS, Azure Kubernetes service. If you want to deploy multiple nodes and pods, and how we are going to scale out or scale in our pods. So bear with me. And there's one thing I should tell you, and this about the scaling out. In AKS, you can only scale out or scale in. You can only scale out or scale in a pod horizontally. Okay, this horizontally. There's two types of scaling out or scaling in. There's one vertical scaling, and there's one horizontal scaling. Now, what are vertical scalings or horizontal scaling? Now, this one H horizontal, and this is vertical V. So in vertical scaling, suppose I have a virtual machine. I'm just giving you an example, and then you can relate with the scaling out or scaling in of the pod. So suppose I have a virtual machine, and I have to scale it vertically. So in vertically, when we're in vertical scaling, we are actually upping the memories and CPU power and everything. Okay, so when you are scaling in vertically a virtual machine, that means that you are scaling up that you are scaling up the CPU power, memory, and the storage power of your virtual machine. You are not physically increasing the number of the virtual machine, but you are scaling up. You are powering it up. You are scaling it up by CPU, memory, and storage. Okay, or when you are scaling down vertically, you just do the opposite. You are scaling down the CPU, memory, and storage. Now, in horizontal scaling in or scaling out, you are actually increasing the number of the VMs. Okay, this is called horizontal scaling, or scaling in or scaling out. You are not doing anything with the CPU, memory, or the storage. You are just increasing the number of this virtual machines, identical virtual machines, for your application to run more smoothly in the busy hour. Okay, this is called a horizontal scaling in, scaling up. And when you are decreasing the number of the virtual machines, then it's called horizontal scaling down. So this is about the scaling in and scaling out. In our next tutorial, we are going to see the Azure Kubernetes service. We are going to create one node, and then create one pod and one pod, and then we're going to host the nginx server in this pod, and then we're going to scale it virtually. We're going to scaling it up. We're going to create 2 pods, and then we're going to distribute this service between these pods equally. So that's it for our containerized instances. Now we're going to see the Azure Kubernetes service.